During a client meeting that was supposed to secure our biggest deal of the year, everything started going wrong the moment my boss walked in late. He didn't even look at me when he sat down. I had spent weeks preparing that presentation, late nights, missed dinners, double-checking every projection. The client was already tense, flipping through the printed slides I had carefully put together. Halfway through the meeting, right as I was explaining the projected growth strategy, my boss suddenly interrupted me. He leaned back in his chair, sighed loudly, and said, "Let's be honest here, she failed us on this one." The room went completely silent. I felt every eye turned toward me. My chest tightened, but I didn't speak. "Not yet," he continued, shaking his head like he was disappointed. "These numbers just don't make sense. We expected much better preparation." The client frowned. One of them even closed the folder in front of them. That's when I realized what he was doing. He was setting me up, blaming me, in front of everyone for numbers he had personally approved just 2 days before. For a second, I thought about staying quiet, letting it pass,
keeping my job.
But then something shifted. I calmly walked to the laptop connected to the screen. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "I'd like to show something before we move on." He looked annoyed. "This isn't the time." But I had already pulled it up. A different file appeared on the screen. The real numbers, along with the email thread. Highlighted. Dated.
Signed.
By him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at him. I just let the screen speak. "These," I said, "are the figures that were approved in writing before this meeting." No one said a word. The client leaned forward. My boss went pale. Someone on their side asked quietly, "So, these projections were changed after approval?" I finally looked at him. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The room that had been ready to blame me just minutes ago was now completely still, but for a very different reason. And, for the first time in that meeting, I wasn't the one under pressure anymore. My boss cleared his throat, forcing a tight smile like he could still regain control. "Well," he said, adjusting his tie, "there seems to have been a misunderstanding." But the client cut him off. "I don't think so." That was the moment everything shifted. The same people who had been doubting me minutes earlier were now flipping through the documents again, this time paying attention to the timestamps, the approvals, his name. One of the senior partners leaned back and crossed his arms. "So you approved inflated projections," he said slowly, "and then tried to distance yourself from them in front of us?" No one even looked at me anymore. All eyes were on him. I stepped back from the screen, giving them space, not interrupting, not adding anything. I didn't need to. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "I think we're focusing on the wrong issue here. The goal is still to..." "No," the client replied firmly. "Trust is the issue." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was final. A few seconds later, one of them turned to me. "Can you walk us through the original strategy? The one you prepared?" That was it. No apology. No dramatic speech. Just recognition. I nodded, walked back to the table, and continued exactly where I had been interrupted. But now, every word landed differently. They listened. They asked me questions. They took notes. And my boss. He didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. When it was over, the clients shook my hand before leaving. "Thank you for your transparency," one of them said quietly. I watched them walk out, then started gathering my things. My boss approached me, his voice low and tense. "You didn't have to do that." I looked at him, calm. "Yes," I said. "I did." For a moment, he just stared at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. But it didn't matter anymore, because the damage he tried to cause had just rewritten my position in that room. And this time, everyone knew exactly who I was. He walked away without another word, but I could feel it. Something had broken. Not just his credibility, his control. The next morning, I was called into a meeting. Not with him. With the CEO. And HR. As I walked in, I noticed something immediately. The tone was different.
Calm. Direct.
Observant. "Please have a seat," the CEO said. There was a printed folder on the table. I recognized it instantly. The email thread. The real numbers. My presentation. All of it. He looked at me, then folded his hands. I'd like you to walk us through exactly what happened yesterday. So I did. No exaggeration. No emotion. Just facts. What I prepared. What was approved. What changed. And what was said in that room. When I finished, HR exchanged a glance with him. Then he nodded slowly. That aligns with what we've already reviewed. A pause. Then he added, and with what the client reported. That part surprised me. They had already reached out. Later that afternoon, the entire office felt off. Whispers in the hallway. Doors closing. Meetings being scheduled last minute. And then, an email went out.
Short.
Formal. My boss was stepping down effective immediately. No details. No explanation. But everyone knew. About an hour later, I was called in again. Same room. Same table. Different outcome. We'd like you to take over the account, the CEO said. Effective today. I didn't react right away. Not because I was shocked, but because I understood exactly what that meant. Responsibility. Visibility. Pressure.
Trust.
I accept, I said. That night, I stayed late.
Same desk.
Same office. But nothing felt the same. I opened my original presentation, the one I had built from scratch. Adjusted it. Refined it. Owned it. Because this time, no one was going to speak over me. No one was going to rewrite my work. No one was going to use my silence against me. A week later, I walked into another client meeting. Same room. Same table. Same stakes. But when I connected my laptop and looked up, no one questioned why I was there. No one interrupted. No one doubted. I started presenting. And this time, no one stopped me. Halfway through the presentation, one of the senior clients leaned forward, studying me carefully. You handled a difficult situation last week, he said. Most people wouldn't have. I paused for just a second. Neither would I replied honestly. Not before. A subtle shift moved through the room. Not tension this time, but respect. By the end of the meeting, the deal was back on track. Not just saved.
Stronger.
Better terms. Clearer expectations. Direct communication with me. When we wrapped up, they didn't just shake my hand. They asked for me. From now on, one of them said, we'd prefer to work with you directly. I nodded. Understood. Weeks passed. Then months. The account grew. Then expanded. What started as one of the most uncomfortable moments of my career quietly became the turning point of it. Not because I proved someone wrong, but because I stopped letting someone else define my value. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I ran into someone from another department. He looked at me and said, almost casually, "You're the one who turned that meeting around, right?" I thought about it. The silence. The accusation. The screen lighting up with the truth. Yeah, I said simply.
He nodded, impressed.
I heard the room went completely silent. I gave a small smile. It did. But what I didn't say was this. That silence wasn't empty. It was the moment everything changed. The moment I realized something no one teaches you early in your career. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. Let them speak. Let them doubt you. Let them get it wrong. And then, when it matters most, show the truth. And let it speak louder than anything you could have said. Months later, I was invited to speak at an internal leadership meeting. Not as support. Not as the assistant. But as the person leading one of the company's fastest-growing accounts. As I stood at the front of the room, I noticed something unexpected. He was there, sitting in the back. My former boss. No longer leading. No longer speaking. Just watching. For a brief moment, our eyes met. And I could see it clearly. Not anger, not arrogance. Recognition. I turned back to the room and began. This account almost collapsed the day we first presented it, I said. Not because of bad strategy, but because of misalignment. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. Everyone in that room had already heard the story. When I finished, the CEO nodded. Well handled, he said. Simple. But it carried weight. After the meeting, as people started to leave, I felt someone approach me. I turned. It was him. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled quietly. I misjudged you. No excuses. No long explanation.
Just that.
I studied his face, the same man who had once said, "You failed us," without hesitation. And, for the first time, he didn't look in control. "I know," I said. Not cold. Not kind.
Just honest.
He nodded slowly. "I thought I could manage the narrative," he admitted. "Control how things looked in that room." I let that sit for a moment. "And now?"
I asked.
He gave a small, almost defeated smile. "Now I know the truth doesn't need help." He left after that. No handshake. No closure. Just distance. That night, I stayed back again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I walked into the same meeting room where everything had changed. Same table. Same screen. Same silence. I stood there for a moment, remembering exactly how it felt. Being interrupted. Being blamed. Being underestimated. And then, being heard. I turned off the lights and headed for the door. Because the truth was, that moment was never really about him. Or the meeting. Or even the deal. It was about the exact second I stopped waiting for permission. And decided to be undeniable. And once that happens, no one gets to speak over you again. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was asked to mentor a new hire.
Young.
Quiet. Observant. On his second day, he sat across from me in a meeting, notebook open, barely speaking, just watching everything unfold. And, at one point, someone interrupted him mid-sentence. Dismissed his idea. Moved on like it didn't matter. I saw it instantly. That same moment. That same silence. That same choice. Stay quiet or step in. "Wait," I said calmly. The room paused. I turned to him. "Finish what you were saying." He hesitated at first, then nodded. And as he spoke, I noticed something familiar. People started listening. Really listening. After the meeting, he approached me. "Thanks," he said. "I thought I messed that up." I shook my head. "No," I replied. "You just weren't done yet." That night, on my way out, I passed the glass wall of another meeting room. Different team. Different conversation. Same dynamic. Someone trying to be heard. Someone being overlooked. And it hit me. This doesn't just happen once. It happens everywhere. All the time. But the difference is, some people wait for permission to speak. And some people change the room when they do. I kept walking, but this time with a quiet certainty. Because I wasn't just the person who survived that meeting anymore. I was the person who understood it, who could recognize that moment before it broke someone else, who could decide when silence protects you and when it costs you everything. And ever since that day, whenever the room goes quiet, I don't wonder what to do anymore. I just remember who I became, the moment I chose not to disappear. Over time, I started noticing something else. It wasn't just about meetings anymore. It was about patterns. Who gets interrupted?
Who gets credited?
Who gets doubted before they even speak? And more importantly,
Who decides to change that?
one day, during a high-stakes negotiation, a senior executive from the client side leaned back and said, "I'd like to hear from someone with more experience." The room shifted slightly. All eyes moved past me, like I wasn't even there. Months ago, that would have been enough. Enough to make me shrink. Enough to make me stay quiet. But this time, I didn't wait. I led this strategy from the beginning. I said calmly. "So, if there are questions, I'm the most qualified person in the room to answer them." No tension in my voice. No defensiveness. Just truth. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said. "Go ahead." And just like that, the door that used to close on me stayed open. After the meeting, one of my colleagues caught up to me. "I don't know how you do that," she said. "You don't raise your voice, but somehow no one questions you." I thought about it for a second, then answered honestly. "I used to wait to be recognized," I said. "Now I just show up like I already am." She smiled, but I could tell she was still thinking about it. And I understood why. Because that shift, it's invisible. Until it isn't. That night, I sat at my desk a little longer than usual. Not working. Just reflecting. on how close I came to letting that one moment define me. That one sentence. You failed, US. It could have stuck. It almost did. But instead, it became the moment everything changed. Not because I fought louder. Not because I proved more. But because I chose the exact moment to stop accepting a version of me that was never true. And the strange part is, no one ever brings up that meeting anymore. Not the accusation. Not the silence. Not even the fallout. But I do. Not out of anger. Not out of pride. But because that was the moment I learned something I carry into every room now. People will decide who you are in seconds. Based on tone, position, confidence. But if you let the truth speak,
Clearly.
calmly, at the right time, you don't just change their minds. You change your place in the room. And once that shifts, it never really goes back. Years later, I was sitting in a boardroom again. Bigger table, higher stakes, different title next to my name, but the same kind of silence. A proposal had just been presented, ambitious, risky, and familiar. Too familiar. I flipped through the document slowly, recognizing the patterns almost instantly. Inflated projections, optimistic assumptions, numbers that looked right, but weren't. And then I heard it. A voice across the table, confident, dismissive. These figures are solid. We can move forward. I looked up, and for a brief second, it felt like I was sitting in that same chair again, listening to someone else try to control the narrative. Only this time, I wasn't the one being blamed. I closed the folder gently. I'd like to review something before we approve this, I said. The room paused, not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't need to. I stood, walked to the screen, and connected my laptop. A few clicks, a few files, and there it was. The breakdown, the inconsistencies, the truth. This version, I said, doesn't match the original dataset. I turned slightly, letting the room absorb it. These projections were adjusted. No accusation, no emotion, just clarity. Someone asked, "Are you saying this was intentional?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to, because I had learned something a long time ago. You don't always have to say everything when the evidence already does. The room shifted. Questions started. Voices changed. And just like that, the direction of the entire meeting turned. Afterward, as people gathered their things, one of the newer executives approached me. "How did you catch that so quickly?" he asked. I held his gaze for a moment, because I've seen what happens when no one does. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I had actually said. And maybe he did. As I walked out of that room, I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned, like every version of me that had ever sat quietly, doubted herself, or been spoken over, had led to that exact moment. Because the truth is, that meeting, years ago, never really ended. It just changed shape, showed up in different rooms, different voices, different stakes. But the lesson stayed the same. Speak when it matters. Stay calm when it counts. And never let someone rewrite reality when you have the facts in your hands. Because, in the end, it's not about proving people wrong. It's about making sure the truth never needs defending twice.